Our students generally fit kind of this profile of using language for their primary major once they graduate. And so that makes kind of the linking of language and proficiency something that's kind of obvious to the students and that they're honestly looking for. They're looking to use the skills that they gain in our classroom once they go on the job market. And so it made kind of the Proficiency Initiative also a natural fit for our students.
You're listening to Speaking of Language, a podcast recorded at the Language Resource Center at Cornell University. Each week, we explore a topic related to language pedagogy and second language acquisition. This week, on Speaking of Language,
Leanne Spino and Karen Bruin discuss the Language Proficiency Initiative at the University of Rhode Island and its impact on students and the curriculum.
Welcome to a new episode of Speaking of Language. I'm Angelica Kramer, the director of the Language Resource Center at Cornell University.
And I'm Sam Lupowitz, the LRC's media manager. We are delighted to welcome two colleagues today, Leanne Spino and Karen Bruin from the University of Rhode Island.
Their proficiency initiative across all language programs at URI has been prominently featured in venues like the AACU's Liberal Education and ACTFL's Language Educator, and we will hear from them how proficiency and employability are connected.
Welcome to Speaking of Language, Leanne and Karen.
Thanks. It's a pleasure to be here.
Before we hear everything about your wonderful language-related initiatives at URI, will you please share with us a little bit about your background with both languages and the research interests?
Sure, I'll start. So this is Leanne. I am a graduate of Michigan State University from the Second Language Studies program. My dissertation was on the acquisition of grammatical gender agreement in L2 Spanish. But while I was at Michigan State, I taught Spanish, and I worked closely as the coordinating assistant to Bill Van Patten. Bill, if you're listening to this, hi.
He just might be.
Yeah, great human being, great mentor. And so I worked with him on the Spanish language program, specifically the lower division. And so when I graduated, I got a job at Princeton University as a Spanish lecturer. And there I worked on Aprendo, which is an interactive Spanish language platform designed by Princeton for Princeton students. And so I've had a lot of experience, I guess, with kind of the more applied side of things. And so, then I landed a job at the University of Rhode Island as an assistant professor of Spanish and as their proficiency coordinator. So now a lot of my research is tied to this initiative at URI.
Wonderful. Karen, what about you?
Yeah, so I got my PhD at the University of Chicago, and my dissertation was nothing related to language. It was on Germaine de Staël, who is an late 18th, early 19th century French female philosopher and writer. And I guess my contribution to all of this is not at all linguistic in nature. It's more in terms of leadership. And so I came to the University of Rhode Island and became the French section head. Now I'm the department chair of the Department of Modern and Classical Languages and Literatures, and it's a department that's quite large. I mean, we have 6 programs. One of the programs includes Arabic, Japanese, and classical languages. So we offer about, it varies on the semester, but roughly around 9 to 11 languages per semester. And so that's really how I came to the Proficiency Initiative. I can tell you a little bit more about how it started a little bit later, but it was just by virtue of becoming the department chair at a strategic time.
Mm-hmm. You recently published an article in ACTFL's Language Educator titled Increasing Graduates' Employability Through Language Proficiency and Dual Degrees. How did the URI Proficiency Initiative come about, and what are you investigating?
I became department chair at a time, at sort of a transition time, I guess, in our department. We were already known for what's called the International Engineering Program, which is a program that brings together language and engineering. And we have a national and international reputation for this pioneering program. And when I became department chair, I noticed, one of the things that I knew about our department was that we were just very siloed. So even though we did that IEP program really well, we were still just very much in language silos and competition with each other for resources. And yet there were interesting things going on in each program. And so I decided that, I think that what we needed to do as a department was to come together sort of under our motto, and then see if we couldn't move forward in an innovative direction. And so the motto I gave the department was, we can do more together than we can separately. And so we decided to take stock of what we do well in our department, and we have a Chinese flagship program under the National Language Flagship Programs. And so the Chinese flagship program already had in place proficiency testing and benchmarking, because all the students have to achieve a superior level of proficiency by the time they graduate after 5 years. So we had that. We had the IEP program, and we were creating an international studies and diplomacy program. And I was a co-founder of that program. And so we decided to write into that ISD program, International Studies and Diplomacy program, proficiency benchmarking and proficiency testing. Now, I pulled this all completely out of my butt because I was, I knew that Chinese flagship was great. I knew that we should incorporate it in our languages department. We wrote it into our ISD program. But like I told you, I work on German, the style of French philosopher who doesn't talk about proficiency ever. And so, so I was like, okay, well, we need people that can help us with this. And so we wrote into our ISD program proposal the hiring of a proficiency coordinator, and also the hiring of an intercultural competence coordinator. And we got the proficiency coordinator right away. Well, 2 years into the initiative, and she is awesome. So
that's me, by the way. Many thanks, Connie.
So Leanne can pick up what we're doing with proficiency.
Sure. So something that you may have been able to glean from Karin's description is that a lot of our majors are dual majors. And not only that, a lot of our majors have declared a language major after they've declared some other major. So they decide that they want to do engineering, and then they tack on a language, or they decide that they want to do business, and then they add a language kind of thing. And so that means that our students generally fit kind of this profile of using language, probably in hopes for their primary major once they graduate. And so that makes kind of the linking of language and proficiency something that's kind of obvious to the students, and that they're honestly looking for. They're looking to use the skills that they gain in our classroom once they go on the job market after they've graduated. And so it made kind of the Proficiency Initiative also a natural fit for our students. And so what we're trying to do is look critically at our program and decide what can we do, or what do we need to do to benefit these students, so that when they go out on the job market, or when they go out to use their language after they leave our doors, how can we ensure that they can use the language to the best of their ability and continue to maintain that language proficiency. So that's kind of, I would say, kind of the crux or the core of what we're really interested in for the students. And it's not easy. So getting to advanced levels of proficiency within the confines of 4 years of academic study doesn't come very naturally, right? I mean, that's just not how language acquisition works.
Yeah.
And so it's a bit of an uphill battle, but we're fighting the good fight on behalf of them. And so I'd say our core research question is, what can we do to best benefit these students in this context? And so we'll probably talk a lot about proficiency today, but I want to make it super clear that we're not just focused on proficiency. So that's not really the only goal for our students. We also have a great intercultural communicative competence, ICC coordinator, Dr. Bing Mu, who is doing great work, kind of focusing more on that side of things. So we're not only on the proficiency bandwagon, but it is a core goal that we have for our students.
Yeah, wonderful. And as part of this proficiency initiative, in your article, you lay out 3 strategies. So it's not only about testing students, but also looking at faculty training and the effect on the curriculum. Can you talk a little bit about those 3 different areas before we dive more into testing and actually what you found to be the benefits of that?
Testing alone does not a good program make. And so what we've really focused on, in addition to testing, is faculty training. and then curricular revamping. So I'll start with faculty training, because that obviously should precede curricular revamping. And so what, as you could tell from Karin's description, the first step that the department took was to hire experts, which Bill Van Patten has a great white paper about the importance of that. And so we hired experts, and all of our future hires are also most likely tied to these initiatives as well.
Nice.
And so that's kind of one way to naturally build the expertise within your department, is to make sure that the new people coming in are on board. And so that was one thing. Another incredible feat, or at least I still view it as incredible, even though I've been at URI for 3 years, is that all of our full-time faculty members have attended the 4-day ACTFL training, where you learn about the guidelines and everything, which 4 full days is a long time. I mean, it's an intense training. And so the fact that everyone has graciously and enthusiastically, honestly, agreed to complete that training has been really, really great to see. And now I think about 50% of our full-time faculty members are also either pursuing or have achieved OPI testing certification.
Nice.
So yeah, we have a strong knowledge base, and then we also do other things. We've invested in ACTFL's virtual learning modules for faculty members. We had Dr. Erwin Scherner come to URI as a Max K Distinguished Scholar for a semester, and we hope to invite him back for more fun in the future.
And when you do send him our way too, we're not that far apart. we're a big fan of Vin's.
Yes. So yeah, he's awesome. So so we've really done what I think is our due diligence to make sure that everyone is kind of educated with what this all entails, because at the end of the day, our faculty are the people teaching our students. So they definitely kind of have to have that buy-in as well. And so that's the faculty training. And then we've also looked at curricular revamping. And the strategy that we're going with is kind of revamping as we go along. So obviously, as faculty learn, they're modifying their courses, but we're doing a strategic revamping from the bottom up, essentially. And so every summer, we have faculty members across all languages that come together under the guidance of our ICC coordinator, and they look at their classes and they overhaul them. So starting from one-on-one on up with everything that they've learned. And what's really cool about that is that it's all the languages coming together and doing it together. That doesn't mean that Spanish classes look exactly like Arabic classes or something, but that there's a good cross-pollination of ideas and kind of camaraderie as we all go through this process together. So yeah, we also have done other things like create modules in our virtual learning platform for students, teaching them about proficiency, teaching them about the tests that they take so that they're not shocked or surprised once they take them, teaching them about the ACTFL guidelines, things like that. So yeah, doing a comprehensive approach, I think.
Wonderful.
Could I just build on something with that, with regard to what Leanne said, just to give you just sort of an idea of the scope of this? We have, again, it sort of varies by the year, but we have 28 to 30 full-time faculty members in our department. So when she says that we all underwent 4-day OPI training, I mean, we're talking about some scholars who are like me, who have zero competence in any sort of applied, linguistic endeavor. And so, so it was huge. I mean, we're talking about people that come from 18th century Italian, from film and the Maghreb. We're talking about just a range of people who decided to buy into this 4-day OPI training. And what that did was it gave us a common vocabulary and a common understanding of what was developmentally appropriate for our students. So for those of us who are non-linguists, it very quickly became clear to us what we could and should be doing in our upper level language courses, because we had that typical language literature divide. And so the humanities still have a very important place in our in our department and in our curricula, but the proficiency initiatives allowed us to really get a sense for, again, what is developmentally appropriate. And so I've really appreciated that.
That's wonderful. I mean, this is everything you're talking about is exactly how a department should be structured, and how we really can support the proficiency of our students. This is really a model for everybody else to replicate.
Yeah. And one of the things that was a great unifying force, I guess, was really putting the students first, because that's an argument that nobody disagreed with, no matter what the disparate research interests or anything like that was. And given the profile of our students, it was obvious that this was something that they would want. And so we're all good people and educators at heart, right? Like this is something that everyone, no matter what kind of research they did, could get on board with. So I think that was kind of key to it. We also just have great faculty, but still unifying.
I was just going to say that the other added benefit that Leanne that she touched on, but is that it's easily articulated to the upper administration and to parents. And so the upper administration, obviously funds these initiatives, and so the upper administration understands the word proficiency, and they understand language proficiency, and they understand companies looking for people who are proficient in languages. And so it was just like an immediate, it's an immediate click with the upper administration, and the same for intercultural communicative competence. Everybody understands intercultural competence.
Can you talk a bit more about your findings related to the benefits of proficiency assessments?
So what we do is we test our students every semester at URI. We don't test every student every semester, though, because we have thousands of students. That would be too much for me to handle because I organize the testing. So we test students strategically at what we call the midpoint and the endpoint. And so the midpoint is like a bottleneck course that most language majors or almost all language majors pass through at a certain point. So that usually corresponds to between the 4th and the 6th semester of language study if you were to start at the most basic level course. And so that would be the midpoint, and we test every student that passes through that midpoint every semester. And then we also test at the endpoint, which is usually right before graduation, so that students that are graduating go out on the market with the certificate of their proficiency as they leave our doors. And so we kind of have these two different snapshots into our program. That's kind of our typical testing structure, but we have done kind of additional testing or different testing depending on the needs of different languages and language sections. The test that we most typically use is the OPIC, the Oral Proficiency Interview Computer, and the ALIRA, the Actual Latin Interpretive Reading Assessment for Latin. Yes, even Latin is part of this part of this initiative. And so yes, we're primarily looking at speaking scores. That's kind of the baseline of what we do. But again, we've done reading testing, we've done listening testing, we've done almost it all. And we've done writing testing in a couple of languages as well. So that's kind of the basic structure, and that's kind of the data that we have at hand. And so what we're really looking for is kind of testing students to get where our baseline is, revamping our curriculum, and then continuing to test them so we can kind of make evidence-based interventions in terms of what we're doing with our curricular revamping. But the testing in itself, even though we're waiting for that kind of long-term data, the testing in itself really does have benefits for students. I mentioned before, they go out on the market with a certificate of their linguistic ability. It provides positive washback. Like, it's very clear what the goals are, both for faculty and for students. And so faculty are really looking at their student scores at the end of each semester too, right, to see where their students are. Testing also can provide you with information about students that you can use for advising or to differentiate your teaching, which is also great. So testing in the short term has really served to benefit both our faculty and students as well. So the testing has been great. And so in terms of research, we're looking at where we are now and where we're going. And then we're also looking at kind of more specific issues that affect our students now. So we're looking at, for example, how to advise them on how to select the correct form on the OPIC. When you take the OPIC, there are various different levels. and the students have to select their level. And that's a choice that is fraught with danger because if they pick at too high a level, then they can't get a rating on that test because they don't meet the minimum baseline proficiency you need to get a rating. So it's fraught with worry for me and difficulty for the students, even though they don't really know it. So we're looking at how to aid them in selecting the best test form. We piloted the APPT, which is the Actual Proficiency Placement Test, for the first time last semester. And so we're looking at that data now and trying to determine what are appropriate cutoffs and how did the test function, what did students think of it, things like that. And then this semester, we have our first round of IDI testing, which is the Intercultural Development Inventory. And so that's part of our ICC initiative. So we'll be looking to see how, what relationship there is, if anything, between proficiency and IDI.
For people who are again, sort of more literature focused or content, sort of traditionally content focused, while this might sound a little overwhelming, again, the benefits are huge because, so for example, I teach 2 upper level literature courses, and thanks to the testing that the students do, I'm able to then establish their levels and then I differentiate the learning based on developmentally appropriate tasks. And so like a student that's an intermediate mid student, for example, I'm not going to ask them to analyze a text because they're not able to do it linguistically. Whereas a student that might be advanced low or advanced mid, I can ask to, especially if I'm going to start pushing them towards, advanced high, I can ask them to analyze in the target language. So it's not to say that an intermediate student can't analyze a text. It's just that they don't have the skills to be able to do it. So if I'm going to ask them to do that, then I have to switch back into English. And then another thing that's wonderful with regard to this testing is study abroad. For study abroad advising, because we send a lot of our students abroad, obviously, for a semester or for a year. And if the goal is to increase language proficiency while abroad, I mean, we used to have a strategy where we just sent them abroad, crossed our fingers, and hoped they would make linguistic gains. But what we've done since then is that we're able to identify what their levels are before they leave. And so we can then advise them on the right program, get them involved in the right types of immersion programs or content-based, if they're ready for it, programs. And then we can also sort of assess their levels when they get back to see how much they actually gained. And then in conjunction with intercultural communicative competence, these two things are intricately tied because so many students, they go abroad and they get abroad and then they turn around within a week and come back because it's just too culturally overwhelming and they don't have the tools. Or they go abroad and they don't make the proficiency gains that they should because on an intercultural level, the competence is not high enough for them to get beyond sort of the obstacles of daily life. So these two initiatives together are just, are invaluable, I think, to any language department that's seeking to, an undergraduate language department that's seeking to create global professionals.
So since you've launched this initiative, or both of these initiatives, have you seen changes in the proficiency levels within your student body, or is it too early to really say, exactly what the effect is?
That's a really great question. So our first round of proficiency testing occurred, I want to say, in spring 2019.
Oh, okay. So not that long ago.
And then COVID hit.
Yes. Okay.
So now, so obviously the format of instruction has changed quite radically. And then also the testing modality has changed slightly. So one of the things that I didn't mention was that we test, generally speaking, during class time. That's another impressive buy-in from faculty members. All faculty members that are slated for testing dedicate either a class day or part of their final exam time to testing.
Nice.
And so that's kind of the structure. You test in person and you test during class time, which obviously doesn't work well with COVID. And so ACFL and LTI do offer remote proctoring, which we do have historically used since COVID hit. And so we've continued on with our testing. But I'm hesitant to kind of say whether or not we have great data as to how well this has been working so far, just because both the instruction has changed so radically, and then also the testing structure in itself has changed radically, in the sense that the remote proctoring is a very different testing environment than testing during class. So I'm pleading the fifth for now. We're going to give it a few more years for the world to stabilize.
There you go.
And then we'll kind of reassess.
Well, and then we'll check in with you maybe in a few seasons on our podcast here and see the 2.0 version of what's happening at URI.
Exactly. Yeah. Hound me back down.
I think it's important to keep in mind, though, also that this is a long-term. This is not a quick thing that we put in place. It's long-term. And so, so we've only revamped our first 2 semesters of courses. We're doing 2 more semesters this semester. And so to have an idea of whether, our course revamping is effective. I mean, that's one question. Is our course revamping effective, right? And so we need some time to put in place all of the course revamping and then test that. But I think like where we see changes immediately anyway are, and they're more anecdotal at this point, but are in the way that we communicate language learning to our students. Because before we weren't communicating how you learn a language to students. We were just, like I said, like same approach as study abroad was the approach to teaching language. It's like you teach the language class, you cross your fingers, they make progress, and then you send them on their merry way. And now, and the students had no idea, they're sitting in language class. Oh yeah, I guess I should be learning about direct object pronouns. Okay, I just learned them. Wonderful, except for, like students don't realize that. And then, those students that have taken 4 semesters of language, say, when they've graduated, I took 4 semesters of Spanish or French or Arabic, but I don't remember anything. Well, it's because they don't understand that if they only made intermediate low, well, no, they can't make sentences yet, right? And so they needed to they would have needed to push themselves, up a level in order to start to be able to communicate more effectively. And so it's like the fact that students are now learning, in a lot of our classes, we're taking the time to explain to them, what does novice mean? What does intermediate mean? What does advanced mean? Yeah. And it makes a big, big difference for students to know that, okay, yeah, I guess I'm at intermediate mid. That means I can communicate with a sentence. I know that I'm going to make lots of mistakes. I know that I haven't mastered the past tense yet, but I know that that's what I have to push myself to do to get to intermediate high or to get to, to advanced low. If I want to get to advanced low, well, I better stop, starting a story in the past and continuing it in the present. It's like things like this where the students are starting to realize what they have to do in order to move up a sub-level. And that's huge. That's huge compared to what we used to do.
What's up next? Are you continuing and expanding the initiative? Are you analyzing other aspects of the data? Inquiring minds want to know.
So yeah, I think what I mentioned before is also kind of what's up next. It's what we're currently working on. So we're looking at, for example, the APPT in more detail. We're looking at how to select correct forms on the OPIC. We'll be doing that proficiency and IDI testing this spring and looking at the data for that. My hope is that long-term we'll also be looking more critically at study abroad. That took a really hard and obvious pause with COVID. We have some great work that's already being done with our international engineering program and study abroad, with the international studies and diplomacy program. They're working a lot on training before going abroad as well. And I hope that's something that we build out in terms of ICC and proficiency for all of our students studying abroad in all of our programs, and maybe even on provider programs as well. So I hope we take that turn in the future. Given the state of the world, that's not happening at the moment. I'm more optimistic that we can kind of repick that up next year or the year after.
Yeah, and as department chair, I'm chair for another year and just a little bit less than a year and a half. And I told the department that I'm stepping down. So what I'd like to do within this time, is just make sure that we keep evolving with the ICC initiative alongside the Proficiency Initiative robustly, and then building out our signature programs. There's a lot of potential there. And then we'll see what the next department chair does.
Well, and then maybe, Karen, you can also write a manual for other department chairs and administrators on how they can convince their faculty members to buy into such a wonderful initiative. I know that when I was involved at Michigan State at that proficiency initiative, that certainly was something that we struggled with too. How do you convince all faculty members in all the various units to to actually follow this proficiency-oriented trajectory. So
Yeah.
your wisdom will be appreciated by many.
It's appreciated by me. Imagine my terror when I accepted this job and realized before I knew everyone, right, and knew that this was actually working well. Imagine my terror at accepting this job that puts me right in the center of what I thought was going to be a really thorny and polemic issue among faculty members. Like, I thought that I was just going to be the lightning rod. And I am very happy to say that I was very wrong. and Karin somehow did magic before my arrival and got people on board. I did not expect that.
Yeah. So what final piece of advice do you have for language educators who are interested in articulating the importance of proficiency to all the stakeholders, students, parents, administrators, employers? What one piece of advice would you give to your colleagues?
Those are a lot of stakeholders. That's a good question. I think I would focus on the students first. And in our experience, this has been kind of a natural sell to students, or I'm not even sure that we're selling it to students. I think that this is what the students naturally wanted, and we are honoring their wishes by continuing with this proficiency initiative. And so I would say that if you focus on the students and what is best for the students and what they're asking for and what would benefit them in the future, then you see this kind of, washback or benefits for other stakeholders as well. So by putting the students first, obviously their parents win, right? I think that one's kind of easier. But by putting the students first, administrators also have, in our experience, gotten on board with it. And we've been able to secure things like position requests, which is really, really difficult in academia, right? We've been able, by putting the students first, we've been able to kind of shore up and secure our enrollments, which is magical in current times, right? So I think by really looking at what's in their best interest and by trying to serve them for the best of to our ability, it has a lot of positive domino effect for a lot of different stakeholders, including ourselves.
If people are struggling to articulate the importance of proficiency to, maybe to all, there's 3 really useful ACTful visuals that I use. The first is the inverted pyramid, and have people understand that that's the amount of hours it takes to move from one level to the next. The second is the graph, not the graph, but the chart with all the categories of languages and how many hours it takes to get from one level to the next. So group 1 languages, it takes a certain number of hours to get from intermediate to advanced, etc. And then the third one is the ACTful chart, where it talks about the number of, talks about the proficiency levels and what you can do professionally with those proficiency levels. And that one is really super helpful for all stakeholders, because then people can see why at intermediate mid, you can't do anything professionally yet. That's why you have to hold on and keep going. It's a long-term investment. And that's how I get people on board with regard to how long of an investment this is. So those are the three visuals I think are useful.
All right. Well, before we sign off, we'd like to ask both of you to share your favorite word in a language you speak, love, or are learning. Leanne, would you like to start?
Okay. So I've thought about this because I knew this was coming. And I do what every respectable academic does in these situations, is I went to my 2.5-year-old and asked her which thought. And the word that she gave me is cambur, which is a word in Spanish that might actually be a new word to many Spanish speakers because it's Venezuelan Spanish, and it means banana. So when I became a mother, I knew the fight that I was going to fight was going to be to get my kid to be bilingual or to maintain her Spanish. Her father is Venezuelan. I am not. I'm not Latina, but I obviously speak Spanish as a assistant professor of Spanish, and so we speak Spanish at home. And I knew that I was going to fight the getting my kid to speak Spanish fight. Mm-hmm. But what I didn't realize is that I was also going to fight the fight to get my kid to speak Venezuelan fight or Venezuelan Spanish fight. Mm-hmm. So like now that she watches quarantine YouTube because I need to get work done, she's watching all these shows, and some of her Venezuelan words are being supplanted by words from other regions. And for some reason, it makes me incredibly sad. I have no idea why. So cambur is that word that she says a million times a day. She's always asking for a banana. And it makes me see her as a little kid of Venezuelan descent, which makes me happy. I think, that'll slowly go away.
That's
so
awesome.
I'm sticking with cambur.
All right, Karen, how about you?
Lekker. Lekker is an Afrikaans word. I'm from South Africa, and it's while I reject my cultural upbringing, it's still my home language, Afrikaans, and lekker is this word that means, it can mean anything that's positive. It can mean nice, wonderful. Yes, that was delicious. It can mean, oh, that was just such a great experience. This was a wonderful talk. Lekker. It's my favorite word.
Well, I think to that, all I have to say is lekker. Am I saying that right?
Yeah.
There you go. Well, thank you so much for speaking of language with us, Leanne and Karen.
Yeah, thanks for having
My
us.
pleasure. Thank you so much for having us.
Next week, we will talk about the history of African languages at Cornell with Dr. André-Thérèse Asier-Lumumba.
Until then.
Auf Wiederhören!
The Language Resource Center is located on the ground floor of Stimson Hall on Cornell's main campus in Ithaca, New York. Check us out on the web at lrc.cornell.edu or look for Cornell LRC on Facebook and Twitter.
Speaking of Language is produced by Angelica Kramer and Sam Lupowitz.
Recorded by Sam Lupowitz.
Original music by Sam Lupowitz, Dan Gable, and Joe Gibson.
Thanks also to the College of Arts and Sciences at Cornell University.
As a reminder, the ideas and opinions expressed on this podcast do not reflect those of the College of Arts and Sciences or any other official entity of Cornell University.
We thank our listeners, and do stay tuned for our next episode.